grew up with dreams of playing a sport at the highest level, idolizing a top player and having posters on your wall? If those posters were of David Beckham, well, this is the episode for you. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of Channeling Hallmark, the podcast where we talk about all the things that make us feel warm and fuzzy, like when you feel the grass under your feet on a sunny day. We're your hosts, Dylan Cashbaugh
and Keetin Markey.
And today we are talking about the classic movie from our childhood, Bend It Like Beckham. The movie about a young girl who dreams of, well, bending it like David Beckham. And to go along with that, we're talking to the head of content for Angel City Football Club, Jennifer Pransky. But before we get to all of that, Keetin, do we have a tea that we're drinking?
We do. This tea is inspired not only by the Indian traditions we got to watch in Bend It Like Beckham, because chai tea did originate in India.
Ooh.
Yeah, see? Special little thing there. But also because I have seemed to lost my sense of taste and smell, and chai is a very spicy tea, and so I want to be able to taste it.
This will be a good test if you're feeling better, if you can actually taste the flavors of the tea.
Yeah, or like how good the tea is. Okay, so we're just gonna, we got some, this is called Republic Chai from the Republic of Tea. Here we go. It's good.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it too.
I do taste it. It's probably spicier for you than
Good.
it is for me. But hoping that I can kick this cold to the curb. Would we call it a cold? I would call it a very angry virus. A cold seems too simple for what I've been dealing with for the past week.
So is this a tea that you recommend when people are having a cold or
Yeah.
horrible virus?
Yes, no, I think so. There's some caffeine in it, so hopefully give me some energy, and I think it's a good tea. I like it. I would recommend it. I would love to do a chai tea latte with this. I love a chai tea latte.
Yeah, I guess I suppose in theory I do know what goes into a chai tea latte, but I don't think I've ever made a chai tea latte at home. Have you?
No.
We should try that sometime.
We should try that. If you have a recipe for a chai tea latte for us, please send it our way because we don't have it.
Please do.
So I know we're sipping on tea, but did you get some hot cocoa to share, Dylan?
I do. This hot cocoa is inspired by this week's movie, Bend It Like Beckham. And I feel like this is probably reasonably common knowledge, but for anyone who doesn't know, David Beckham loves bees. And that, to me, is such a fun, cozy thing. I mean, this guy is one of the most famous footballers ever, was at the top of the sport, playing for one of the best countries, the best teams, and has so much fame and fortune. And you know what he does now? He keeps bees. He raises bees on his land. He gathers their honey. He puts on the bee suit. It's just such a fun thing that if you watch the documentary that I think came out last year or 2 years ago on Netflix, it features his love of bees. And I think bees are much like sharks, bees are a very misunderstood creature because they are actually wonderful animals that give a lot of good to the world, they literally spread flowers and make honey. What could be better than that in the world? So thank you, bees.
I love that so much. My hot cocoa this week also is a little soccer inspired. Ooh. One of the reasons there are many reasons we picked this movie this week, but one of the reasons is we did find out that Ted Lasso, our favorite show, the most warm and fuzzy show that we know, is coming back for a season 4, and I believe they started filming this week, which is very exciting. But beyond that, Bend It Like Beckham is a movie that I have been obsessed with since I was a kid. I saw a lot of myself in Keira Knightley watching it when I was a kid, but to get my husband to finally watch this amazing coming of age, hilarious kind of indie British comedy about soccer was so warm and fuzzy for me. So that's kind of my hot cocoa. After a week of being really, really sick, it was fun to see you enjoy it as much as I enjoy it.
Good. I mean, I guess that's a bit of a spoiler for our review coming up, but yes, I did very much enjoy it, and I'm really happy that I got to finally experience it.
Great. Well, should we talk about Bend It Like Beckham?
Yeah, let's get to it. Keetin, can you tell us about Bend It Like Beckham?
Let me tell you about one of my favorite childhood movies. So Bend It Like Beckham came out in 2002 when I was 13 years old. And it's about Jess, who's your typical teenager who dreams of playing soccer on the world stage. But when she starts playing for a local club, her life gets a lot more complicated. From dealing with her traditional Indian family, to the complications of teenage friendships, to having feelings for her young coach. Jess's life goes from simple to drama in no time.
Starring Parminder Nagra and Keira Knightley, this Gurinder Chadha directed movie is a British indie classic that inspired countless young girls to be themselves. As someone who just watched this classic for the first time, I was surprised by how well most of it holds up and how authentic it feels. But Keetin, you were exactly the target audience as a young teenager playing sports when you first saw this movie in 2002. So thinking back to 13-year-old Keetin, what was your experience like when you first saw this?
It was one of those movies that I feel like I got out of the theater and I was like, I could immediately watch it again. I saw so much of myself in Jess and Jules, and I had never really been introduced to Indian culture, and I was so fascinated by the beauty of Indian culture and how it's represented through family. Like, yes, that is a huge foil throughout the film for Jess, is fighting against her Indian culture, but I think they had such a beautiful balance of, you know, there was one line that the coach says at one point of like, I see why you don't want to lose your family because of how much they love you and care for you. And it's just like, it's that juxtaposition of like, oh, you want to have this close relationship with your family. You want to have parents that really care about you. But when is that caring too much and too overbearing? And I think a lot of people struggle with that even into adulthood. So it was really lovely to watch. And I really loved this movie growing up. And again, every time I watch, it's like a comfort movie for me. I can put it on anytime.
Yeah, I think this movie did a really nice job of portraying that family dynamic of a young teenager. And though I may not have been a young British Indian teenage girl when I was growing up, it still felt really relatable in a lot of ways because it had that kind of feeling like, oh, I want to just go do my own thing and who cares what my family says, and kind of mixed up with the complications of friendships when you're a teenager and romance when you're a teenager and wanting to play sports and having big dreams and trying to balance that with a little bit of, I guess, realism. And I think it did a really impressive job of capturing kind of what it feels like to be a teenager.
Yeah, even though I know even after we watched it last night, we were like, how old are these girls supposed to be? It was a little confusing, but I think what we figured out is around 18 years old, because it would be really weird if they weren't 18 or over when they're having relations with their 20-plus-year-old coach.
Yeah, I still have some qualms with that, but let's at least say that they're 18 because that at least makes it feel a little bit better.
Yeah, it sounds like they finished equivalent, they have finished what was equivalent of high school in England. And so now it's, what do we do? Do we take a gap year? Do we go to school? What are our plans for the future? Such a pivotal time in a kid's life. But the other reason I think this movie I love so much is because I already had like a fascination about London and England and stuff, just from like Harry Potter films and whatnot. But this kind of showed me London for the first time through like a teenage girl's eyes, of like that whole montage of them kind of going to the city and shopping together. Oh my gosh, I just dreamed about doing that. And I remember the first time I went to London, I did feel like that when I was with my friend Mike, and we kind of got to explore Piccadilly Circus together for the first time. And I still have such nostalgia for that.
Yeah, I think it did a great job of capturing the moment while also feeling, I guess I'm a little hesitant to use the word timeless because there were a lot of, the fashion and the specific players and teams and everything
I'm
involved.
sorry, that fashion is back in style now,
but,
which is wild.
But I guess like this was a movie that was made or came out in 2002 when, David Beckham fever was at its peak, when Mia Hamm and the U.S. women's soccer team was huge in the world and the culture, and both of those were such a big part of this that I feel like it did an amazing job of kind of capturing that moment. But those are also things that feel like they're still relatable now. You swap David Beckham for Cristiano Ronaldo or Leo Messi. You swap the U.S. women's soccer team for, I don't know, Caitlin Clark and the
women's
basketball.
Sports in general.
Like it's still very relatable, just with today's figures and teams in the same place, but it's all the same feelings and all the same kind of stories.
Well, and I think another, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we all grew up watching sports movies. This is one of the first sports movies I ever saw, besides like DComs, like on Disney Channel, that was focused on women. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another reason why this has such a strong place in my heart, because as an athlete, as a kid, you just want to kind of see yourself on screen. And I didn't until I saw this movie. I think the other movie I might think of, which isn't even a sports movie, is like Sisterhood of Traveling Pants. And that's just because Blake Lively's character played soccer and was like doing soccer as they were doing their traveling pants thing. But this movie was so ahead of its time and is still so relevant and shows me not only how far we've come with women's sports, but also how far we still need to go. Because can you think of any other female-led sports movies?
I mean, A League of Their Own, but that was not as... A League of Their Own is a great movie, but it's also about a adult women's baseball team that existed because of extenuating circumstances surrounding, like, the men's team.
I'd also say that's like a historical
film.
It
definitely doesn't feel as relatable as Bend It Like Beckham did, whereas Bend It Like Beckham, it could happen to anyone. It could happen like on any day, and it feels like this is a real story, even though it's not.
I don't know. Maybe it was based off a real story.
Maybe it was. I can tell you, I know with reasonable confidence that David Beckham is a real person.
Yes.
So there is some truth to it.
Yes. And I thought the acting was incredible. I felt like it walked the line so well of being caricatures of, especially now that I know more about Indian culture and I have more friends who are Indian, of like not making like fun of kind of like Indian traditions and cultures and stereotypes, but like also kind of having commentary on it. But I say that's the direction and the actors who really towed that line very well. And also introduced, I feel like, a huge audience to like a look behind the curtain of what that family lifestyle in London is like.
Yeah, I mean, let's rewind a little bit and put ourselves in 2002 when this movie came out. This was directed by an Indian woman in 2002 when there were like 4 women directors that even existed in mainstream Hollywood, at least at the time. And this was a huge cultural movie that reached a lot of screens in the US. As much as this feels like an indie movie in a lot of ways, which it was made for only $5.4 million, and it has that indie quality. But it was huge in the box office in terms of like, I think it made over $70 million, and a lot of people watched this. This was a big cultural movie directed by an Indian woman at a time when it was almost all white men directing movies.
Yeah. I loved seeing kind of they have like in classic early 2000s fashion, a blooper reel over everybody trying to sing a song over the credits. But you do see not only how small the crew is, because you see a lot of the same people in like the pictures, but just like, I don't know, this set seemed like a fun place to be. It seemed like a very warm place to be. And you could tell people really put their hearts and souls into it. And to be able to also be a female Indian director, pulling the curtain back on your culture and kind of the struggles maybe you have faced as an Indian woman in a modern world, a year after September 11th. Like, I mean, you think about that too, like also using sports as kind of the avenue to reach people. I'm so impressed by her. And if I would have known the significance when I was 13, when I first saw this movie, I feel like it might have even had a bigger impact on me than it already did.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about the wonderful things about this movie, because I think we're both very big fans of it. But I do need to touch on my one qualm with this movie, and that is the relationship between Jess and her coach. I mean, I spent most of this movie wondering how old Jess was supposed to be, but either way, she's definitely a teenager. Like, at the oldest here, we're talking 18 years old. And sure, let's say her coach is maybe in his early 20s, which isn't too bad, but it's still just a little inappropriate, in my opinion, to have regardless of the age, a coach of a high school aged team dating one of the players and having a relationship with her. That I was really hoping at the end it was going to be it was going to be that female empowerment, I don't need this guy kind of message. And then spoiler alert, they kind of get together in the end and it's treated like, yeah, everybody wins. And I'm like, that's a little gross to me. But
1, 2002. Two, in the UK, it is a little bit different. Once you're 18, you are very much considered an adult. And honestly, too, I will say this. Jess could be engaged at that age within her kind of within her culture. So I understand your qualms. I get it. But I think it made sense in needing to kind of you had to show that dynamic and that struggle of female relationships at that age. And often hormones are raging. Jealousy is a huge piece of that. And I think also the cultural dynamic of an interracial relationship heightens those stakes even more. I felt like they handled it very well. I felt like it was used correctly as a plot driving device. And I'm going to look the other way at the weird age thing. So
I don't disagree with most of what you're saying. I think it is good to touch on those things. Again, like you said, hormones are raging. He's a good looking guy. I get it. But I think there's a difference between portraying the complexity of how it feels to be that age and potentially be attracted to your coach, and then at the end of the movie sort of celebrating that. I feel like if they hadn't gotten together in the end, I would have been very happy with this movie and had essentially no critiques. But because it takes something that does feel a little inappropriate to me and sort of, and like I said, celebrates it, that even in 2002 feels a little bit off to me.
I don't know. As a young girl watching it, I wanted them to get together.
Really?
I totally understand where you're coming from and stuff. And it could have been just as impactful if Jess basically, because you kind of see that they toyed with that in that final scene. She goes up to him and she kind of is like, hey, no, I get you want to do this, but I just don't think it's going to work. I'm going to be away, whatever. And then it's and then she kind of just goes along with it. But I could have seen it just been just as powerful. Her being like, good luck. I can't wait to see what you do with the women's team next year. We'll talk when I get back. And just left that open-ended. And then had her obviously and her friend, girl power, we're not going to let a guy get in between us, walk off together. That could have been just as fine.
I would argue better.
Well, and that's fine. 13-year-old Keetin really wanted them to get together.
So we talked a lot about it.
Yeah.
Keetin.
Yeah.
Do you want to share your marshmallow rating of Bend It Like Beckham?
Yeah. I'm giving it a 10.
What?
I'm giving it a 10. I love this movie. And I hadn't seen it in a while before we watched it last night. And I couldn't have been smiling bigger when it was over. It made me feel better. It was my hot cocoa for the week is rewatching this film. And it's a 10. If I give Wicked a 10, I got to give this a 10.
I understand now why you stopped using Letterboxd, because you would just be giving every movie 5 out of 5 stars because you just love everything, which is not a bad thing. It's good to love things.
I needed some positivity in my. I was an easy one to please because I was in a rough shape this week. So
that's true.
But it's still, it's iconic. This movie's iconic.
Yeah, it is undeniably a comforting, fun, enjoyable movie that I laughed so much and smiled basically the whole time watching it, except for when they kiss at the end. So I'm gonna give this I'll give this 8 marshmallows because it was definitely warm and fuzzy for me. It did have some flaws and some things that made me feel a little less warm and fuzzy. But overall, I would watch this movie again anytime and recommend it to everyone in the world.
I love that for you. Welcome to the Bend It Like Beckham Love Fest.
Thank you for introducing me to this delightful movie.
It also makes me very excited. It's very funny because we did have Torrance on last week. Torrance was in The Tutors with Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, who
Oh, I
played
didn't even
Henry
think
VIII
about
in that.
that.
And Torrance also talked about the movie that's coming out that he's in, where he plays a female soccer coach. So it's just it's so random to me that not only the Ted Lasso season 2 gets announced, we have the Torrance connection of it all. This movie was meant to be reviewed and talked about this week. And now we have an amazing guest to talk to who has an amazing connection to this movie as well.
Yeah. When we come back, we will be talking to Jennifer Pransky, who is the head of content for the Angel City Football Club. Stick around. Today on Channeling Hallmark, we are joined by Jennifer Pransky, the head of content at Angel City Football Club. Jennifer has worked in sports media for over 20 years, covering pretty much all the biggest sports and all the major sporting events. As someone who has worked in sports for at least the majority of your career, what draws you to sport?
I think sports can create the greatest social change. And honestly, that's why I love it so much. You know, if I get very historical on you, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball before Brown versus the Board of Education. And, you know, so like all these things happened in our country, especially, you know, all these civil rights movements and barriers being broken in sports before legislation and other things were happening. So it's always just been this vehicle for change, you know? And I also just think it's amazing to see what is possible with the physical body. Like, what are the things that it can do, you know? And that's what sports do. It really pushes, well, not me because I'm not a professional athlete, but it pushes people to the limit to see what we as humans can physically tackle.
I love that. That I have never thought of sports as being kind of that first thing that changes, but it is, I feel like it's something that everybody watches for the most part. And to be able to get people to see difference and to accept difference. Because you think back to the Olympics even too, when, you know, some of the first kind of interracial like matches races were, when obviously World War II was happening. That was a huge Olympics in Germany, I believe. And I've never thought of sports like that. And I don't know why. So thank you for kind of opening my eyes to really how powerful sport is, really.
Because winning trumps everything, right?
Yeah.
Winning, people want to win, whether you're a country or a team or whatever.
Yeah.
And so if you know that there's a person who can help you win, you'll do anything, whether it's, like I said, break a color barrier, or a gender rule, or whatever it is to win. And it's sort of that very strange equalizer that makes everything else go out the window.
So you are the head of content for Angel City. Mm-hmm. What exactly does the head of content for a sports organization? What are you in charge of? What do you do?
The easy way of thinking about it is if you see it or hear it, it probably came from my team. So on my staff we create videos, we do photography and graphic design and all that. And we're just sort of responsible for what you see and hear out there from Angel City. So if you see our video, you watch a video, my team most likely produced and edited, shot it, all of that. If you see our graphics on social media or on a billboard, or you're in the stadium in a game and you see any graphic that pops up, all of that came from our, design team. If you're seeing photographs out there in the world, that's from our, staff photography. So it's all those sort of visual and visual elements that you see out in the world about us.
And as a local Angelino, I am familiar with Angel City FC, but for those listening who may not be, can you kind of just give us a little bit of a rundown of what Angel City FC is and also kind of what makes them special as an organization?
We're a professional women's soccer team located here in Los Angeles. We just started our 4th season, and we are just a couple games in to the season. And so we're still sort of in that startup mode, to be honest. But the team was founded to kind of do what I was talking about earlier, to kind of to recognize that sports can be a little bit greater than the game itself. So our 3 founders, Natalie Portman, Kara Nortman, and Julie Ehrman, there's a longer story there, but it basically all came together because, around equity and just wanting and just realizing that, gosh, we've got some of the greatest athletes in the world playing this sport, and why don't we have a team in Los Angeles, and why don't they get paid the same and treated the same and all of that? But then secondarily recognizing that sports and businesses can contribute to the greater good. So Angel City's overall mission is to, we talk about creating and pushing standards and excellence on and off the field. And so there's a lot of products and programs and things that we do that are constantly promoting and building and strengthening the community. So one just example of that is 10% of every sponsorship dollar that we bring in goes directly back into community programming. And it's fairly unique and revolutionary in terms of, not just sports teams, but I think in just, corporations in general. And it's what's actually brought sponsors to us and want to work with us because they like this idea that they're, everything is sort of values driven now. Well, for the most part, the world is heading towards caring about values a little bit more, I hope. And so when you find like that you're value aligned with an organization, then that, it just creates like better business and, in a better world. I don't know. I tell people all the time, like, I'm here to help make the world a better place, as cheesy as that might sound. But I mean, that's kind of why I took this job, to be honest, was because the mission of the team, as much as it's like, oh yeah, and we play soccer. That's the part I don't do, but I do promote the playing of the soccer. But I really ended up taking this job because this team and this organization recognized what it could do outside of the stadium.
One, I love that. But I am a fan of English football. I follow English football teams, and one thing that they are known for is hooliganism and like the rivalry, the intense rivalries, and oftentimes in England and the rest of the world that literally takes the form of violence when these fans clash. And then Angel City is kind of known as a really inclusive community where the fans are not at all violent, but they're actually really friendly and they have an amazing group of supporters. Is that something that developed naturally, or was the mission of the team from the beginning, hey, we want to be different and we want to make our fans be a beacon of hope and optimism in what can be a pretty competitive world?
I mean, it was our mission, but it was also natural because so many people who are fans of women's soccer are generally people that care about the world and care about each other and care about inclusivity. So that was sort of already built into the natural fan base, but it was our mission to make sure that we created an environment where everyone felt welcome. And so we play at BMO Stadium, and it's a gorgeous stadium where LAFC plays as well, the men's MLS team. And I will say, if you go, it's the same house, it's the same stadium, but if you go to an LAFC game, it feels different than when you go to an Angel City game. And it's not saying one is better than the other. They're just very different environments. Exactly what you're talking about, how the fan base just is and, portrays himself and walks around the building, right? And that's something we care about and we cultivate. And a lot of it is due to the fans and the nature of like the people that they are that have been gravitating towards us. But we do care about that environment. And one of the things that we care about a lot is that there's, and I'm really proud of, is we talk about how every single game at Angel City is someone's first game. And so you want them to have the best experience possible. That's sort of like, what we think about in terms of how you treat everybody in the stadium, is it could be their first game and you want them to come back and have the best experience ever. However, the other side of that I love so much is that we've had so many people come to our games that have never been to a sporting event in their entire lives. And then they fall in love with it because of the environment that we've built and how they do feel safe. And, we've had people tell us, I've never been to a sporting event where I feel like I can hold my partner's hand. And while outside of us, that is very sad. But inside our world, that makes me happy, is that everyone just feels like they can be whoever they are. And what's great is that we've got a little bit of everybody,
Truly.
I don't like when we just talk about it being a family-friendly environment, because it is, but I am a single childless person who enjoys being single and childless, and I don't want to be in a stadium full of children, and so I do also want to make sure we promote that environment too, that it's just a fun place to be. So we have a bit of everything. If you are married with children, it is wonderful for you, but if you are single and childless, it is also just as amazing.
Also, if you're a couple too, we've been to a game and we had so much fun, and like I think that was maybe something I didn't even realize in kind of my experience was how safe I felt. And like, I don't even do well in crowds these days. Like, I don't do well in a movie. Like, you know, because there's this lack of trust, I feel like, a little bit in the world. But again, that environment there, it feels like a warm hug. People are smiling. No one's pushing. No one's getting angry. No one, it is. I've never had a sports game experience like that. But I wanted to ask you, with your 20 years kind of within sports, whether it's soccer or a different sport, do you think it's because it's women's sports, or do you think there's something else in the air that is changing kind of the environment or how people are when they do watch women's sports versus, I guess, what the traditional dude sports?
Yeah. I'd like to think that if we had started a men's soccer team, that our environment would still feel the same. That's a big what if, and who knows, just because that's been our purpose and our drive and our mission. That being said, I do think that we are in a very specific time where people who are just excited to support women's sports, and honestly, not because it's, you know, it needs the help, it needs the support. It's because it's fun and it's kind of awesome and it's exciting. And you get to see, again, the people who are at the very best of what they do in the world. No matter what you're doing, you know, if it's sports or, I don't know, flame throwing or welding, if you know you're getting to see the best of the best, that's really exciting. And then to do it in an environment where you feel like if you know, when someone scores a goal and you're high-fiving the person next to you and, you know, not worried about a fight breaking out if the home team loses, that's just a fun environment that makes you something you want to come back to and brave the LA traffic for.
No, sorry. Have you watched the best in the world at flame throwing? What is that like? I'm very intrigued now.
I have not. And it's really a bigger question maybe for another podcast about why that's what popped into my head.
All right. So I guess some context setting. You alluded to this, but did you play soccer growing up at all? Did you watch Bend It Like Beckham and you were like, oh yeah, I also have Mia Hamm and David Beckham posters on my wall? Or is soccer kind of in some ways a foreign world to you?
I didn't play soccer, so I was always an athlete. I did swimming, gymnastics, basketball, volleyball, and rugby. So I did almost everything except for soccer. I am terrible at kicking a ball, but I can do all of the other things. But always really enjoyed the sport. I really didn't get super involved and excited with it until I started working in Europe on American football. Way back when, there used to be this thing called the NFL Europe League that would play during the summers when it was in the off season for the NFL. And they would, you know, teams would send their practice squad players to go, you know, just to go get more experience. And I worked at Fox Sports at the time. And so we sort of did the same thing. We would go over to Europe and broadcast these games back here in America, but we would get to go over there and train for a job that was like a promotion for us. So you get to, you know, get experience with very few people watching back home. So if you screwed up, there wasn't such a downfall to your national television screw up. But, and we actually also tested out announcers there and things like that. So that was a great experience. I did that for several summers. And, you know, if you're working and living in England and at lunch, you go to the pub to watch the EPL games or to watch soccer, and to get to experience soccer in that environment, I don't know how you could not fall in love or get excited about the sport. So that was sort of my big entree into really loving the sport of soccer, even though I had never played before. And then later in my career in Fox Sports, we got the rights to the FIFA World Cups, and so I did all of the video production and storytelling around the 2015, 18, and 19 World Cups for them, plus a whole ton of soccer in between then. And so that became one of the things that I worked on the most, like some of my biggest events that I ended up working on, and got to fall in love with it that way and spend a lot of time with the U.S. Women's National Team. And really just loved seeing them come to, you know, the rise of popularity that they did, which is probably why Angel City Football Club exists at all, you know, because there became this big drive in popularity and the want to see these players play more.
I mean, I have personally loved watching, at least in my lifetime, the history of women's soccer in the U.S. because, like, when I was young, it was the Mia Hamm era when people were falling in love with U.S. soccer, at least as far as I know, kind of for the first time through that team. But then
I would argue it wasn't just like U.S. soccer. I think Mia Hamm, to me, broke barriers of just, she's the first like professional women's sports person I remember being in pop culture. Like she and Michael Jordan doing that commercial together is the first time I ever saw like a woman who was the top of her game in sports, like looked at as the same as Michael Jordan. Like, anyway, sorry.
And it was reluctantly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Mia is such an amazing human, and she understands her role and how much she's had to help propel all of this forward. But if she had her choice, she would do none of the commercials and none of the interviews.
But she has made the world a better place by doing that, and I love it. And
that's why she did it, because she knows. You know what I mean? She knows. Yeah.
And I guess more recently, we also had the last few years in World Cups with Megan Rapinoe and like that team, which has been a new era of amazing quality out of the U.S. women's soccer team. And I feel like it seems to me like women's soccer, but also women's sports in general, have really been kind of steadily growing recently. Do you feel that as someone who works in media in women's sports, is that true, or is that just my perception?
If that's your perception, then I think that it is true. No, I do. I really think it is. I think we're in a very special point in time where women's sports are kind of at the peak, where the highest point they've ever been with, and but still it's only halfway up the mountain, right? There's just so much more to grow, but it can get there. And I think people are finally seeing that. If you're someone with some bags full of money, women's sports is probably the best investment you can make right now. And I'm not even just talking about soccer. I mean, there's, whether it's basketball or lacrosse or women's volleyball, I hear is like going to be one of the next huge up and coming things. So if you got some money under the mattress, go invest in women's volleyball right now. But it is, because it's still sort of at that point where it's not going to be like super cheap to get in. But if you get in now, you're going to establish yourself in an area that only is going to grow. Yeah. And it's been a lot of fun to see, but there's been a lot of pressure on a lot of these athletes because of it. Yes, it started with Mia Hamm, and so much was on her shoulders, and all of those players from that era. But it's that pressure is still on all of their shoulders. Even the Caitlin Clarks and Angel Reese's, and there's so much more that they have to do to keep the train moving forward.
Do you think, and just in your experience, because you mentioned how Mia Hamm was reluctant, and I know a lot of women, they just want to play. They just want to play. Yeah. Do you feel like this is an unfair? I mean, it's always so sorry. I'm like, it's always unfair for women than men. But
get on your soapbox. That's okay.
No. We can edit this. I'm just like, wait. Let me make sure I'm going to word this question correctly. Do you think women who are getting into sports, who are making this trajectory, wanting to potentially go pro in whatever sport that they play, do you think that is something that they need to be prepared for to keep this train moving forward? Or do you think they can go into it just being like, I just care about the game? Because a lot of men are just like, don't even talk to me. I'm just caring about the game. Do you think that women have the luxury of doing that?
No, but I actually think that no professional athlete really has, whether you're male or female, has the luxury of doing that anymore. I mean, LeBron because of his skill, but also because he does a lot of the things,
Space Jam 2.
Yeah, exactly. Feature review on Channeling Hallmark. But the biggest stars do the thing. They realize that the half of being the professional and a professional athlete is not playing. It's everything you do outside of that to help promote your game and promote your team and your sport. If no one comes to buy a ticket to watch you play, you're not going to have a league or a team to play for, and then you will no longer be a professional. And I get that so many of them don't like that part of the job because it's not a muscle that you exercise when you are training to be the best in the world at your sport, but it is a muscle you got to learn to exercise and learn to do well if you want to succeed and if you want everyone around you to succeed. But it is an interesting thing, I think, especially in the league that I work in, the National Women's Soccer League. A lot of these players aren't used to it yet. The league's only been around, a little over a dozen years. And so a lot of these players grew up in this league with no one coming to their games and no TV promotion and no one interested in doing interviews with them. But now it's suddenly here. And that's a really big switch for a lot of them to all of a sudden go, athletes are so regimented. It's, that's why they get a lot of comparisons to the military. It's because your schedule is very exact. It's very tough physically. So while you might not necessarily you're not training 8 hours a day, but you're still like, you have to focus on your training, your eating, your recovery. And that's all very physically exhausting. Their lives are very regimented. So to all of a sudden, if there's now all this spotlight on your sport and on your team, and part of your day now is doing a whole bunch of media interviews or content for crazy people like me, then, that's a new stressor, and it's something you have to factor into, like, how am I going to do this and how am I going to do this well? And it is a lot for them. So I think we're in this period where some of them are growing up with it, which is great, and they're ready for it. You don't see me saying how the benefits of social media very often. I don't talk about that. But for these young athletes, they at least have grown up understanding how to be in front of a camera, even if that camera's their phone. So they're a little more prepared for it now. It's the athletes that are sort of in that in-between, late 20s, 30s that maybe, have had to make adjustments the last 5 years, I would say. But to go back to your original question, I do think that the women's games, because they're still trying to put more butts in those seats in the stadiums and sell more jerseys, there is a lot more marketing and promotion that needs to be done. That being said, having worked in the sports industry as long as I have, all of the male athletes also knew that this was part of their job, and they always, and they showed up and they did the thing, and the ones that didn't like it, I knew it, but they still did it and they showed up for it. And I'm really appreciative for the professionalism that they all showed. There's a few stories I could tell you where they weren't, but that's for another time.
That's for the after dark.
But it is. It's part of being a professional athlete, and they sadly don't teach you that when you're running drills as a 10-year-old. They don't talk about that.
As someone who is representative of the media side of sports, do you think that? I mean, I think we all know that in every part of the world, media can be a positive or a negative thing. Do you see it as something that's helping to grow women's sports? And is it successful in that? Are there things where media has been really great, or maybe areas where media has not done so well with women's sports?
I mean, for better or for worse, it's a part of the ecosystem. So it all feeds off each other, and the sports need media, and media and sports just to kind of live, and kind of push each other forward. They feed each other. I don't know that I truly believe that all press is good press. But if you're being talked about and you're out there and you're part of the buzz, then, let's face it, my feed alone with how much of Justin Maldoni, Blake Lively content there is right now, and it's endless, and I would like to not see much of it anymore, but it's there because, there's an interest even in the stuff that's not always positive. Mm-hmm. And we as humans, we gravitate towards, the scandal, the rivalry and things like that. And that's actually where I wish we could push things a little bit more is not so much the scandal and the salacious stuff, but the competition and how that is the rivalry. There's your scandal is big rivalry this weekend. Who's going to win? Right. It's not so much that these teams hate each other, but they just hate to lose to one another, and you want to be able to look, I want to make every single player on our roster a star in their own right. I want to do that by promoting what they do on the field, but you can't do that without promoting who they are as a personality as well. So it all just kind of feeds each other. And at the end of it, people are just looking for some kind of human connection, right? That one thing you find out that one thing about that one player that you relate to, or that you hate, but it's memorable, right? Yeah. And you've got that thing, and now you're interested, and now you're watching, and then you're buying a jersey maybe, and then whatever it is, and it all kind of goes from there. So unfortunately, I think without the media, the success of these sports isn't going to be where it is. But it doesn't mean that we always do it in the right way.
Yeah. Look at Welcome to Wrexham. We watch. I get up and watch soccer every weekend morning with you now because of Welcome to Wrexham, and I know the names of the players because I watch that show. Yeah, and we buy tickets when they count. So it's if they didn't have that, I would not know. Yeah, but
that's the thing. It's brilliant, and they've made that human connection. The Ted Lassos and things like that. All of that drums up an interest and a spark because everyone who thought maybe they weren't a sports fan goes, oh, wait, maybe I am. Maybe I am.
And I think when you present sport as not a divider, but as a unifier in the way that you do and that Angel City does, I think that goes a long way towards bringing in people to watch it and to be fans of it that wouldn't otherwise. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
It's the idiom I'm going to screw up, the ships all rise and the tides.
I was thinking about that exact phrase. A rising tide lifts all ships.
Exactly. I really actually push for us to kind of promote other teams as much as we can. I mean, even to small things, we do this piece of content before every game called like 3 Things to Know, and it's about the upcoming match. And the second thing is always kind of scouting report on the other team. And a lot of times it's the positive things about this team because, you got to give a reason for people to, if you're the best, you should be, your win isn't great unless you feel like you're playing against the best, right? So you need to like make sure that you're building up your opponents because otherwise that win isn't as juicy and as exciting, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I am a huge proponent of making the tides lift all the ships because all the ships are great. And as much as I think, to keep the metaphor going, Angel City's ship is riding a wave that's a lot higher than other teams in our league. I want them all to get up there. I'm not trying to be the best at all of this. I want them to come up and meet us, and anything we can do to help, we try to do. And that's also something I'm really proud of Angel City for, is that we've, anytime another team has a question or wants help or wants to know how we did something, because we do have the benefit of being newer. Mm-hmm. And so it's easier to, do things in a new way when you're not trying to break another 10 years of how something's already been done, right? Yeah. So we've been able to consult with a lot of teams and some of the new teams coming in on just how we've done it and they get to learn from the mistakes we've made, and we've made a bunch. But that's what the exciting thing is, that we can all rise together, and I do enjoy that.
Speaking of rising together, but from the media point of view, they just announced recently that Ted Lasso is coming back for a 4th season, but focusing on a women's team.
Okay.
You didn't. Oh, this.
Well, I've only ever seen one episode.
It's totally fine.
You might have to watch season 4.
Yes,
now.
because season 4 is all they're going to coach a women's team.
Amazing.
So they'll be focusing on women. So. And I know you guys have done some things with the Ted Lasso actor. Maybe I'm making this up in my head. Haven't you?
The entire writers team was at our last game, including Jason Sudeikis. We're at our last game. A bunch of them have come. Brendan Hunt has been come to a ton of games. They've been so supportive, and I think they just generally enjoy it. It's great. But yes, very excited to hear that season 4 of Ted Lasso is coming back with that angle. And I apologize that I haven't watched it. I just don't watch much TV.
That's fair.
I watch sports and news, and that's kind of it.
When we finish the interview, we can just sit down and watch all of.
Dylan would stream would marathon Ted Lasso with you if you gave him the chance. That's like his like.
It's my warm.
Show.
It truly is like my comfort show. Where sometimes if I'm down, I'll just be like, "What episode do I feel like watching?" And I'll just throw on a random episode.
Usually, it's the Christmas episode.
No, it's actually oftentimes the episode in Liverpool when they do karaoke.
Okay,
well, that sounds good.
So, I like sports. I work in media. If somebody like me were to want to work in sports in some way that you do, are there jobs available? Like, how can people get involved doing the thing that you're doing to help kind of build women's sports in the way you've helped, or even men's sports?
Yeah, I love talking about this because I feel like there's just so many jobs in sports that people don't know exist, right? When I was at Fox Sports, we mostly hired at the entry-level production assistants, and so many of them would come in with the ambition of wanting to be on air, just knowing that they had to get their foot in the door somehow, right? And so this production assistant job was going to be their ticket to, being a play-by-play person for the NFL. But mostly that we start to realize is that or they want to be a sideline reporter or whatever, it's because that's the jobs that they could see. Right. And so they didn't know that and they knew, yes, of course, there are other jobs, but you don't know what they are. And you don't know that you might have a propensity toward one of them or a fascination with one of them. So my biggest thing is that if you love sports and you want to get into it, is just either ask a lot of questions about the potential like jobs that are out there, or just do that thing where you take the job you can get so that you can start to see what else is available. Right. Because eventually you'll find the path that suits you the most. If it's on the TV side, you say, okay, I love the creativity of post-production and being able to craft a story. And so, yes, now you're more geared towards studio production, or no, I just get the biggest rush from like producing and working on a live event. And because, it's just like the players on the field, you can't control what's happening next, or, you just have to like react to what's going on in front of you. And that gives me such a rush. Okay, great. You're going to go into live broadcast. And there's just like 1,000 jobs that you just don't even know exist. So you got to get in there and see what they are. And don't just feel like there's just that one thing of, oh, I'm on air or I'm a director or producer. No. There's a million other jobs. The other thing I would say is that you can find these jobs in unlikely environments and unlikely places. So yes, there's television, and then there's the team side, but then there's all these other companies that are sort of sports adjacent, right? So you could think of like a Gatorade or a Therabody or all these other companies that actually make products that athletes and teams use. And so much of the content and the production they do is geared towards that world. So you're sort of doing sports production in a way, right? If you go a place where their client are teams or athletes and things like that. So that's the other place I would say to look, especially if the job market's tight, is just don't think it's just, there's just a couple avenues for you to get at least that entree to be in the world of sports. And then the other thing to just know is that when do you watch sports? You watch sports at night, on the weekends, and on holidays. So if you're not willing to work nights, weekends, and holidays, maybe just stick with being a fan.
It's good to know.
And maybe working in them isn't quite for you, because it is a grind. But if you like it and you love it, it's worth it. But otherwise, it is a definite lifestyle change.
That's why I got out of weddings.
Yeah, every weekend, right?
Every weekend.
Yeah.
And especially the really weekends that everybody wants to travel.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely working on those weekends.
For real.
But,
Speaking of weddings, can we talk about how I I am a true life wedding crasher, I feel like, because of you guys and your wedding.
Well, this is also very, very accurate, because actually last week we reviewed the movie that was filmed at our venue.
Oh, wow.
So you have been to our venue. Jen, how do you tell your story of how we got you to our wedding?
I saw you guys on Instagram. You had posted, when you were traveling to Ireland for your wedding and you're in the airport and it says like Dublin and all that. And I see that on Instagram. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Ireland in like 2 days from now. So I just messaged you guys. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm going to be in Ireland too. Congrats on the wedding. And then the response I got back from the two of you was, why don't you come? And I think I sent you 3 Are You Serious?
You did. Yeah. You're like, are you sure? Really? Are you sure you want me? Like yes.
Well, because I recognize the difficulty of wedding planning, and I feel like there are many movies that talk about how adding that one guest can kind of make a difficulty and throw a wrench in the seating plan. And you guys are absolutely yes. And I literally was leaving the next day to go to Ireland, and I was going to be, I think, 20 minutes from where your wedding venue was, like
which is insane. Because it's remote Ireland.
Yeah,
you were not in somewhere that it's like, oh yeah, everybody goes there.
Like, so ridiculous.
People complained about how far they had to travel from Dublin to get to our wedding venue.
Yeah, and I was just literally going to be there on my own, and it was over Thanksgiving. That's the thing, is I'm going to Ireland over Thanksgiving. You guys haven't had your wedding, and they're like, you must come. So I think my bag was mostly already packed, and I just threw an extra.
Like a formal dress,
a formal outfit in there, and then we were ready to go. And then there you go. I'm crashing the wedding. It was amazing.
It was so wonderful.
And we were so happy to have. There's actually, I mean, we've talked.
One of my favorite pictures.
Maybe we'll have to share this photo, but one of my favorite photos is, I think, captures the moment that I saw you for the first time, and I'm just like, oh my God, Jen!
Jen made it! Like, because you throw an invite out to your wedding 3 days before your wedding to somebody who just happens to come. You don't know if they're going to come or not. Like, even if you say, oh, I'll try, whatever. And so we just forget. And then I remember we were walking like after our vows down the aisle, and I remember he saw you, and I was like, ah, like our photographer captured it, and it's such like a joyous.
Made it all worth it.
Yeah,
made it all worth it.
It was very, very fun.
It definitely made me feel very warm and fuzzy to see you. And one thing that we do on this show is share something that we call our hot cocoa, which is something we experienced recently that made us feel warm and fuzzy, like a post that we saw or an experience we had or a random historical or scientific fact. There's a lot of options here. But do you have any hot cocoa that you experienced recently that made you feel optimistic about the world that you might want to share?
Well, you guys are just hot cocoa in general. I mean, again, just going back to that wedding story about you guys inviting me last night, you guys are the HC. And this whole environment right now, you can't see this, people at home, but there are fresh baked cookies on this table. I'm drinking hot tea. I mean, there's dogs running around. Like, could you get any more warm and cozy? I mean, they are living it and breathing it here, people. I was thinking about this today, and I don't know that I want to point out anything specifically, but something that gives me the best feeling inside is when I help someone get a job. I don't know. There's something about that really just stands out, where you recommend someone or help them with a resume or whatever it is, and then they come back to you and say they got the job and thank you so much for your help. And I don't know, there's really fewer things that give me such enjoyment and make me just feel so good inside is helping someone like along their career and getting them maybe their next job or whatever it is. You know what it is? It's because that's how I got everything in my life, was because, and this is my biggest piece of advice to people, is tell everyone you know what you're trying to do. Because someone at some point is going to know someone who knows someone or whatever it is. And ultimately, people do like to help people. They don't like to put a lot of work into it. But introducing people to each other is one of the easiest things you can do. And then you get to feel good about it and sort of take credit for it in some ways, right? But that's how every job I've gotten sort of, or the things that have happened to me in my life that were positive, it was because I just sort of word vomited to everybody all the time of what I was trying to do. And eventually someone was able to help out. So it's sort of my way of constantly paying it forward, is just to make sure that I do the same for other people if I can make some sort of connection or help out. And like I said, it just feels good.
I love that. Well, people have heard a lot about Angel City in this interview and what you do. So if people are now interested in going to an Angel City game, or even their local women's football game, football, I should say soccer, right?
You can say
soccer,
either.
Football, okay.
I mean, the FC is football club,
Yeah.
so you can do it.
So how can people come to a game and follow, kind of get into Angel City a little bit more?
Yeah, well, all of our social handles are We Are Angel City, so you can follow us everywhere. And it's just as you said, it's if you just want to help women's sports or you want to get involved, buy that ticket, buy that hat, buy that jersey. Put your money where put your money out there. That's really how you do it. Even my friends who want if I give you comp tickets, it's because I tell you got to go buy something at the store, right? It's like
I almost wore my jersey today.
I
I almost put it on, and then I was like, oh no, I don't want to be too much.
No, but I love it. And that's the thing, is that's how you show your support, and that's how you move it all forward. So we go to a game. That's the biggest thing. Put your butt in that seat. Actually, keep your butt out of the seat, because we want you standing and cheering the whole time. But that's the thing, is buy the ticket and go and have that great time, right? And I do think that if you come to an Angel City game, that you are going to enjoy it. The season has just started. We're 2 games in. We have another home game this coming Sunday on March 30th. It's our Women's History Celebration, night. We're going to have a lot of the former women's national team players there for a special dedication. There's going to be Lucy from the Peanuts will be there. I mean, come on. So, and the season goes through November. This is soccer, so the schedule does get crazy. They take all these weird international breaks, but it means you got a lot of opportunity to come to a game. So go to a game, take your friends. If it's your first time ever going to a soccer game, I'll bet it won't be your last. If it's your first time going to a sporting event, I bet it won't be your last. Yeah, I mean, it's just a fun thing to do. Yeah, come.
Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, it was great talking to you. And we're excited to see what more you do and what more Angel City does.
Thank you. I'm excited for you guys as well on this new venture.
Oh.
Yeah. Yay, sports.
Yay, sports.
Thank you.
That was our interview with Jennifer Pransky, and that is the end of our episode. We hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, maybe you should subscribe so you don't miss any episode, leave a rating and review. And Keetin, what else should people do?
You guys should follow us all across the social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky, at Channeling Hallmark. You can also follow our individual Instagrams at Keetin Markey and at DP Cashpaw.
And remember, if you don't follow us on social media, you're not going to be able to see all of the adorable dog videos that I make. Because, I just put out another one this week. And maybe it's not Huggin' Dogs. It doesn't have an original song, but it does have some great slow-mo frisbee action.
Spoiler alert.
So check that out. And please continue to channel Hallmark in your lives.
Stay cozy, y'all. Bye-bye.
Channeling Hallmark is an independently produced podcast and is neither sponsored nor sanctioned by Hallmark or any other entity. Thank you for listening.